just wanted to go through the formula chart real quick so you know what you have and how to use it and what problems to use it on. This first column is descriptive statistics. We typically don't use this, but it has a lot of formulas that we would find from the calculator. Things like slope, how to find an average, R by hand if you wanted to do that. But again, we don't really use those because we can do so much in the calculator or we're given the information. The second column is all about probability. So up here we have just your basic probability formulas. You have probability of A or B and probability of A and B. Both of those involve probability of A and B. That's this part right here. Just remember, you can only do probability of A times probability of B to get the probability of A and B if you know that A and B are independent. So be careful about that. Otherwise, look at what you're given, look in a table, look in a Venn diagram, look at information you're already given to find the and part of the formula. These two right here are for expected value and standard deviation of a probability model or table. So if you are given a table where you have like each option on the top and then like the probabilities on the bottom, that's when you would use these to find the mean and standard deviation, or expected value and standard deviation. These next three are for a binomial distribution. Binomial distribution is when you know the probability of something happening one time and you want to know the probability of it happening multiple times. So this first one is your probability formula. This is where we would use binom PDF or binom CDF in our calculator to do it quicker, but this is the actual formula for it to show your work, or if you forget how to do it in your calculator. These next two are still binomial, but these are the mean and standard deviation of a binomial model. So if we know the probability of something happening once, and we're interested in how many times it could happen within a certain number of trials. This is the mean of how many times it could happen, and then this is the standard deviation of the number of times it could happen. So again, all three of these are binomial. The remaining four on the page are for sampling distributions. So a sampling distribution is when we take many samples of the same size and find the statistic within each sample and put those statistics in a new distribution. So these are for proportions. If I take many samples of students, the same size of students in each sample, and find the proportion of blonde hair within each sample, put all those proportions on a graph. This would be the mean and standard deviation of that proportion distribution. So the same thing for means. If I take many samples of the same size of students and find the mean number of shoes owned per student, and put all those means on a new distribution, this would be the mean and standard deviation of that distribution. The last column we have over here is your inferential statistics, which is hypothesis tests, confidence intervals. Up here is your general formula. Standard test statistic is your general formula for Z or T. And then confidence interval is your general formula for confidence interval. Statistic would be like your p hat or your x bar. Parameter would be what is true about the population, which is typically your null hypothesis. And then for standard deviation of the statistic, we use one of these formulas in this lovely table depending on what type of problem it is. So one sample mean, one sample proportion, two sample t-test, t-interval, two sample proportion, or two proportion z-test or z-interval. And then last but not least down here you have your chi-squared formula, if you needed to know that. So the other thing I wanted to go through real quick is your tables. So you have your Z table, which on the actual formula chart, these are two separate pages, but you have both sides of your Z table. And then down here you have your T table and your chi-square table. So your T table has, we typically just use that to find the T star. I can't scroll down far enough, but down at the bottom are your confidence levels, and you would look up to find your t-star, or even your z-star are on here. And then table C is your chi-squared table. Both of these we can use the calculator to find a p-value, but you can use these to find a p-value or to estimate a p-value. Just find your degrees of freedom, find where your chi-squared statistic is in this row, and then look up there to estimate your p-value. Same thing over here. Find your degrees of freedom, find where your t-score would fit in this row, and then look up there to find your p-value. So that is it.